This is the first video of 2 videos on the order of operations part 1. In this video, we're going to discuss the order of operations, what they are, and then the video 2, we will actually put the order of operations in use. Make sure that you have your notes so that you can fill them out as we're working the video. If you need to pause the video, please do so that you can stay caught up. Okay, here we have the same problem. 2 minus 3 plus 5. Let's solve it. There's 2 different operations. There's a subtraction and there's an addition. Which one do you think we should do first? Should we add first? Or should we subtract first? Well, let's do it both ways and see what we get. Okay, if we add first, 3 plus 5 is 8. Then we do 2 minus 8, and that's going to give us a negative 6. If we subtract first, we get a negative 1. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. If we add that to a 5, we get a positive 4. So we have 2 different answers. Which one is correct? Well, mathematicians have a certain order that they use when there's a problem that has multiple operations. And this is called the order of operations. And we actually here at Spring Forest use PEMDAS to help us remember the order. And this is what this video is going to do. It's going to discuss the order, what PEMDAS is. So the P stands for parentheses. Some of you have maybe heard of not PEMDAS, but maybe GEMDAS, a G instead of a P, because the G is for groupings. And that's what parentheses means. It means anything that is being grouped together. For example, if I have 3 plus 5, this is a grouping. I could have a grouping that is 6 times 9. I could have a grouping that is 6 times 9 plus 5. Okay? It's where you're grouping numbers together. Okay? This is not considered parentheses. Negative 3. Are you grouping this negative 3 with any other number? No, you're not. This is the type of parentheses that's saying, hey, look at me, I'm negative. We talked about that when we were doing our integer unit. So this is not a true parentheses or grouping symbol. Speaking of symbols, let's talk about the different symbols that there are that means grouping. The first, of course, is going to be your parentheses. Then you have your brackets. Then you have the little fancy ones that are called braces, and I'm not really good at making those. So you're probably familiar with these 3 types. These are all considered parentheses or groupings, but there's also a couple other ones you need to know. First one is going to be this symbol. Do you remember what this is? What this is a symbol for? 2 straight lines. It means absolute value. And then you have numerators and denominators. Sometimes you're going to have operations in the numerator or operations in the denominator or both. And you need to consider those as being groupings. So the numerator is a group and the denominator is a group. So when you're doing order of operations, these are all possible types of parentheses or grouping symbols that you could see, and these are what you would do first. Whatever operations are inside these symbols, you would do first. Then after parentheses, you would do your exponents. Most of you learned about PEMDAS in elementary school, and you just kind of glossed over the E step because you hadn't learned about exponents yet. Well, we've already learned about exponents in 6th grade, so now we are going to actually get to use the E step for exponents. And that's when you have a number to a power. Then you have the M and the D. This stands for multiplication and division. Just because the M is shown first doesn't necessarily mean that it is first. Multiplication and division is actually the same step, and you do it in order from left to right like you're reading a book. So when I write my PEMDAS, I actually, for the M and the D, I write them next to each other, and then I draw an arrow to the right, showing that I need to go from left to right. Whichever operation you see first. If you see the multiplication first, you perform that first. If you see the division first, you perform the division. I want to talk a little bit more about multiplication and division symbols. The different symbols that you could see that mean multiplication, that mean division. But before I do that, go ahead and write down left to right. It's very important to remember multiplication and division is left to right. Okay, let's talk about multiplication. We all are familiar with the X, that means multiplication. As we get more into algebra, we're going to stop using that because one of the things that algebra uses are letters. And X is a very common letter, which are called variables. X is a common variable that is used. And if we have an X, we would easily get confused. Are we talking about multiplication or are we talking about the variable X? So we're going to kind of phase out the X for multiplication, and we're going to see more of the dot. You're also going to see this. You might see a number or letter touching the parentheses, outside of the parentheses, with another number or letter inside. It could be like that, it could be like this. When they're touching and there's no operation symbol in between them, that means it's multiplication. This is A times B, 3 times 5. You maybe will see, if they're two letters, you'll see them written together, AB. That means multiply. You're going to multiply A times B. You could also see them both in individual parentheses. A times B, or if they're two numbers, 3 times 5. These all represent multiplication, and you need to get used to seeing them this way. Then you have your division. So what are some of the common division symbols? Of course, there's the standard division symbol. You may also say a backslash. This is a lot when you're using calculators, it'll show up as a backslash. And then the new one that we've started using this year is the fraction bar. The fraction bar means to divide. And then our last step for the order of operations is the AS, which stands for addition and subtraction. Again, addition and subtraction is the same step, and it is left to right, just like the multiplication and the division. You perform the operations going from left to right like you're reading a book. So again, I write my addition, subtraction, AS together horizontally with an arrow going to the right to show me it's left to right. So let's go back. We look back at our two examples, or example that we started with. The only two operations were subtraction and addition, and we now know that addition and subtraction are the same step, but we need to go from left to right like we're reading a book. So we start on the left. The first operation symbol we get to is the subtraction. So we need to subtract first, which is what we did over here on this example. So you would subtract first and then you would add. And now that you know the order of operation steps, you're ready to go ahead and watch the second video where we will actually put PEMDAS to use and practice solving some problems.